Let me just give you a little piece of what one of them sounds like when they start calling FBI or ICE officers at their homes.
Hi, I'm just calling to say, assuming you're married to and with a last name like that, I don't know how you let your husband work for ICE and you sleep at night. You, your family. I hope your kids get deported by accident. How do you sleep? You. Did you hear what happened to the Nazis after World War II? Because that's what's going to happen to your family.
Oh, that's pleasant. Just one little pleasant phone call that just was recently released. We're going to start by doing the Antifa deception. We're in the middle of that right now. Antifa's not even real. Did you even know that? Left is insisting that Antifa isn't real. Despite multiple violent public incidents, it's quote-unquote made up. Democrats and liberals are increasingly claiming Antifa is not a real organization since Trump designated the group a domestic terrorist organization in September. Critics of the administration point to Antifa's lack of established hierarchy or membership process. You know, that's true. You don't have to wear a pin or anything to be a part of Antifa. And this is a talking point that has really just been very, very consistent on the left lately. Now, I don't know why they feel the need to defend Antifa. I mean, like, you'd think if you're on the left, you just say, look, those are crazy people. We don't have anything to do with them. That's what we say about our crazy groups. They're crazy. I don't want to have anything to do with them. That's not, of course, what the left does. In fact, they do seemingly all the exact same thing. Watch.
There's no Antifa. This is an entirely imaginary organization. There is not an Antifa.
Like, I don't even know what Antifa is. There is no group.
It's not even like far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Compared to right-wing extremists, Antifa-linked violence is rare and limited.
It isn't an organization. It is in many ways mythology.
It's not like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, sort of defined terrorist organizations with leadership that leads violence.
It's not a highly organized movement. It's a moniker. It's not a unified group like the Proud Boys are. Things like Antifa are things that are thought up.
It's all in this guise of going after Antifa, which is nothing. There's no organization called Antifa.
Nobody's a member of Antifa because it doesn't exist. They are just declaring into existence something that doesn't exist.
There is no Antifa organization, so maybe that's good for social media, but it really is non-existent.
They exist on the internet in chat rooms and in 4chan and Discord and places like that where they run discussion boards, trade tactics, documents, things like that. But none of them are called Antifa.
Let's put it this way. They're not like the Proud Boys. That's definitely true. Amazing how all of this all syncs up. And they all start saying the same thing because for a while we were told that Antifa meant anti-fascist, and that was good. So they were real, but good. Now people are not convinced they're good, so now they're not even real. That's I guess the fallback position of many of these people. You notice too, like many of those in that montage from Grabian had the qualifier of, well, it's not like the Proud Boys. Proud Boys those people are really, really organized. Oath Keepers, those people are really, really organized. Not like Antifa is just not even a thing. It's not even an organization. All right, first of all, the Proud Boys are not, yes, they were an organization. I don't even know. I mean, are they even around anymore? I don't even know. Frankly, haven't heard much from them. We've heard really a lot from them on one day. It was kind of started as a jokey organization by a comedian. It was real. This is not a situation where the violence was particularly all that common with them. And the same thing with Oath Keepers, certainly. They weren't started by a comedian as far as I know, but the violent part of this was limited, let's put it that way, in its scope. That being said, when they are violent, very easily just denounced by the right. I have no need for violence. I don't need anyone who's doing that in the name of the right. To me, no thanks. No use for you. That's not something that anybody that I know on the right is preaching or even justifying in any way. And I do wonder how the central messaging even works at this point on the left. It used to be that there would be like Democratic operatives that would leak this messaging to high-level politicians who would then repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. They'd go right to the news anchors and they would repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. I don't know if it works that way anymore. I mean, I think that's almost holding them to too high a standard. I do think that, honestly, at this point, and certainly someone like Joy Behar, who's blatantly reading it in the middle of the show, staring down, what I'm supposed to say now is this. I think a lot of them just look at the same tweets. Like 3 or 4 people make these points and they just read the same articles and the same tweets and they just say the same things. I don't know if it's as organized as it used to be, but it's kind of a ridiculous point, right? I mean, I would kind of put this critique of Antifa under the banner of true but dumb. In that, like, yeah, it's true. They don't have an office in Omaha you can go visit and ask questions of the spokesperson. Like, that's not the way the organization works. But, like, the left is very concerned about things like incels. Well, they also don't have a central office. We were also concerned with terrorist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Well, ISIS never set up shop in Indianapolis and was just like, hey, guys, if you ever need any questions, come down to Maple Street. That's not the way it works. These are groups. A lot of times they are very small. You've heard the terms when it's related to Islamic extremism. There are cells. There are cells that operate in places like Portland and Seattle and all over the country where they take, not necessarily like I'm getting a text from a central leader of Antifa. That's not how it works. But they have an aligned viewpoint. They do share tactics. The last guy in that montage was the closest to a rational point. Yes, they do gather online. Yes, they do share tactics. Tactics for what, though? The violence the rest of them are denying. That's what the tactics are. They're destroying property. They're committing violent acts. They're burning things to the ground. They're attacking police officers. They're attacking citizens in the streets. They're doing all sorts of things. So while it's true they don't have a centralized typical hierarchy like it's a corporation, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is what they're doing, and what they're doing is serious. It's hurting our country. They're attacking federal officers. They're going after people like crazy. They're taking over sections of cities. Remember when they all built their own town inside of a town? Do you remember this? Remember CHOP and CHAZ? These things all actually occurred. And of course, the main thing they do, the most dangerous they get, is when bigger, not necessarily unrelated, but somewhat related protests break out and riots break out. They jump in to make them much worse, and they take advantage of those situations. When the George Floyd stuff is going on, they didn't create the George Floyd situation. They didn't go and they weren't involved in the George Floyd interaction. But once it started getting out of control, they stepped in and made everything worse. They pushed, they antagonized police officers, hoping to get a reaction from them. They burned down buildings, they threw rocks at people, and they were involved in all of this crap over and over and over and over again. And they committed violent acts. Glenn Beck has an op-ed for Blaze Media. Antifa is what you get when cowards run civilization. And he goes into a point here, which I think is also true, in that while they're not centrally organized by, one president who says, I would like this to happen inside of my organization, they are funded by massive organizations on the left who continually fund these and dump money into these organizations and groups and cells, and then allow them to do what they know how to do. Like they know what they're supposed to do. They don't need to get a text every time, hey, it's time to go cause chaos. They know. You go out and cause chaos. That doesn't mean you don't treat them as a threat. For years, the legacy media and left-wing think tanks have portrayed Antifa as decentralized and leaderless. The opposite is true. Antifa is organized, disciplined, and well-funded. Groups like Rose City Antifa in Oregon and the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club in Texas and Jane's Revenge operate as coordinated street militias. Legal fronts such as the National Lawyers Guild provide protection, while crowdfunding networks and international supporters funnel money directly to the movement. The claim that Antifa lacks structure isn't a convenient myth, one that costs Americans dearly. They don't have structure like Kellogg has structure. I need to call the CEO of Kellogg, and they're going to tell me about the new Rice Krispies variety. Yeah, they're Kellogg's, right? Yeah, Kellogg's Rice Krispies. They're not going to do that, but they all know how to make cereal, and they all understand that the goal is to come up with turning grains and sugar into something delicious for breakfast. And they get money directly from these groups. That's a real problem. You can go after those structures. Naming the threat isn't enough, says Glenn. The movement's financiers, organizers, and enablers must also face justice. Every dollar that funds Antifa destruction should be traced, seized, and exposed. This fight transcends party lines. It's not about left versus right. It's about civilization versus anarchy. When politicians and judges excuse and ignore mob violence, they imperil the republic itself. Americans must reject silence and cowardice while street militias operate with impunity. Glenn also had, and so he did a show on this. He was writing a couple of op-eds about it. I mean, he's covered this stuff for years and years and years and years and years. And like the way the media would typically work in this situation, like we are saying, hey, we think there's something going on with this group. We go to the FBI. We say, hey, what research do you have? What have you found? Maybe we find a source in the FBI that will leak us some information or help us as a source to try to unwind this stuff so that the people can understand it. That's usually how it happens. But because Biden and the DOJ were so focused on like going after Donald Trump and people who were protesting at abortion clinics, they didn't do anything on this front. And so we can't go to them. What's happening now is the opposite, where they are coming to us. Now, I'm excited that a Department of Justice would take this seriously enough to come and say, hey, you guys have been doing research on this. What do you have? I'm also nervous about the fact that they would come to Glenn Beck and ask him, like, shouldn't you guys have this information? And the truth is, I think they're just starting down this road, which is a little scary, but also promising. Here's Glenn talking about actually having FBI agents at his house.
Let's just say the FBI is turning over every single stone. It is so clear to me that they are exploring all angles of this, and they are talking to anyone and everyone that can give them any kind of information. How do I know? Saturday, I get a phone call. The director would like to send over some agents to speak to you, Glenn. And I'm like, the direct FBI agents? Yes, you said some things that they need to talk to you about. And I'm like, well, good things or bad things? They'll be over. So they sat in my living room. 3 agents sat in my living room on Saturday afternoon for almost 2 hours. And I immediately called Jason. I'm like, Jason, you're the researcher. It's your fault. I'm going to throw you under the bus. You better get your butt over here. So Jason was there, and my wife and Jason and I sat there, and it was surreal at one point. I talked to him for about 15 minutes just going over the Tides Foundation and saying, if you understand Tides, you'll understand how difficult your job is going to be.
What a bizarre thing to have to experience. It's just a strange world that we live in right now. He also had a little bit more on the FBI interaction.
Let me just say this. Finally, we have an administration and an FBI director that is willing to go in deep, not surface, but deep. I can only imagine what we could have avoided if anyone in an administration would have done this in 2011. But if I were in that imaginary group of Antifa, which, by the way, has imaginary leaders leaving the country to go maybe to imaginary countries outside of the U.S. right now, I would be very concerned. If I were part of anything that was sending money their way or assistance their way, I don't know. I might be a little concerned because the FBI is dead ass serious. Thank you. Thank you, Donald Trump, Kash Patel, and all of the agents at the FBI.
Now, how can they be serious if Antifa doesn't exist? I'm very curious about that. That is a good thing, right? Like, we're happy that they're on the scent, and hopefully we can come up with something here that makes makes this violence go away. These cities, look, I don't live in a city, I don't live in a Democratic city, I don't live in a Democratic state. A lot of this stuff doesn't affect me on a day-to-day basis. I will say Antifa, pretty much, I don't see them around all that often because I don't live anywhere near where they are, thankfully. I will say that that's not fair to the people of Portland or the people of Seattle. or the people of New York, or the people of Chicago. They deserve to have protection from these groups just as much as anybody else. And if we can take criminals off the streets, people who are damaging property, burning down buildings, hurting, and in some cases killing police officers, let's do that. And that is a really good goal. Now, Daniel Goldman says Antifa isn't real. He says, name one member of Antifa. Yeah, let me name the members of the group that wears masks and black everywhere so they're not ever recognized. That's a brilliant point. If it explicitly calls for the overthrow of the USG, where can I find that statement? Let's go to their press office. Trump is trying to suppress opposition by labeling anyone who dissents a domestic terrorist. Don't be fooled. This is lawless and unconstitutional. Well, again, obviously there have been many Antifa members who have been arrested. There have been many people who align with Antifa that have been arrested on assault charges and damage of property. And we have caught a lot of them. So, I mean, I don't know their names off the top of my head. Shockingly, the media never really made stars of them like they make stars of all the mass shooters. They love talking about those guys. Maybe Antifa should start executing healthcare CEOs and we can put them on calendars. Maybe then we know their faces and names for sure. But let me just give you a little piece of what one of them sounds like when they start calling FBI or ICE officers at their homes.
Hi, I'm just calling to say, assuming you're married to and with a last name like that, I don't know how you let your husband work for ICE and you sleep at night. You, your family. I hope your kids get deported by accident. How do you sleep? You. Did you hear what happened to the Nazis after World War II? Because that's what's going to happen to your family.
Oh, that's pleasant. Just one little pleasant phone call that just was recently released. Of course, we've seen much worse than phone calls from these people over the years. By the way, the denial of this is interesting because this is something that has happened in our history before. As Jonathan Turley points out, J. Edgar Hoover declined to admit the mafia existed until on November 14th, 1957, dozens of mobsters were found meeting in a farmhouse in New York. What is different is that Antifa has repeatedly had such farmhouse moments, with prosecutions revealing a national movement with self-identified members. So why the denial? These are shock troops for some politicians who think that they can use the violent group for political advantage. They are mistaken. Antifa is unlikely to have much use for establishment liberals once it gains more power. Until then, Antifa can count on the Goldmans of the world to give them cover in denying that they exist. Now, all of this is going on, and you have these groups that are very excited. They get angry. We've seen what happens when people get very angry about their issue of choice and decide on the left to act out in violence. Of course, Charlie Kirk being the most famous recent example, but the George Floyd riots are another, where we see all sorts of property destruction all over the place. And during those times, what we saw often was politicians coming out and saying, hey, you need to stand up, you need to rise up, you need to go to the streets, you need to harass these people, you need to talk to them, you need to get in their faces, you need to tell them that they don't belong here and all that other stuff. You'd think those tactics, after everything we've seen, would go out the window. Of course, on the other hand, this is what we're getting.
You said this is what tyranny looks like. Can you explain that?
Yes, they have made the Justice Department, which under every other president, Democrat or Republican, pursued the law and went after people who broke the law. They have made it into Trump's personal attack dog. That is what dictatorships do. That's what tyranny is all about. And they did it with Tish James. It is just such a hallmark of tyrannical, autocratic dictatorship societies that they use the prosecutorial department as a political weapon. It is a disgrace, and every American, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, moderate, people should be forcefully rising up against this, speaking out against it, and making it clear how inimical this is to what our democracy has been stood for more than two centuries.
Can you even believe the balls? I love the idea of, I can't believe they would use the Department of Justice to go after political enemies. I mean, they did it with Tish James. How does Donald Trump even know who Tish James is? Because you did it with Tish James, among other people, dozens of them, who were constantly going after and trying to throw Donald Trump in prison. It's amazing that they even attempt this stuff.